Urbanization is happening, and we have the opportunity to steer it in a direction that's more socially and environmentally sustainable.
The Tune Habitat is an organization that works on urban planning and design, everything from a small neighborhood public space upgrade all the way up to regional, metropolitan planning and national urban policy.
So we have programs in about 90 countries. It could be dealing with housing, urban mobility, water and sanitation, to send a signal on how things can be done differently.
We need to promote partnerships, not just with government, but how we can strengthen our collaboration with the private sector, with NGOs and civil society, also with the academic sector.
You need not just good planning and design, you need strong governance and institutions. That's the other skill set that we bring. We bring a very strong emphasis on municipal finance and urban economy. We have a number of programs around land in conflict, which has now been recognized at the highest level by the Secretary General. If you address issues, contentious, difficult, intractable issues of land, you can actually sometimes get to the core of a conflict.
In Sri Lanka, after the tsunami, we are asked to support the government in reconstruction, and then we develop capacity relationships with different parts of government and other players. And that leads to much deeper understanding of what are the issues, but also longer lasting results.
Innovation is not just the application of technology. Innovation is in the way we engage. Innovation is in the processes we institute. Innovation is in the types of partners we bring together. And we want to realize sustainable cities and communities, inclusive cities, resilient cities, safe cities and communities.
Agradecemos a ONU Habitat por su participación y su apoyo para la realización de este evento. Ahora cedo la palabra, o más bien invito a que tomen sus lugares a los moderadores de esta mesa, que son Laura Yanca y Enrique Flores, para que puedan hacer uso ya de este escenario, para que presenten a los ponentes de esta mesa y posteriormente realicen las presentaciones de los demás. Pueden tomar asiento de este lado, pueden estar al momento de la mesa de aquel lado o bien desde este podio para que puedan presentarles. A las, ¿qué será? El receso a las 5:15, 5:15 minutos se les va a dar un tiempo para un pequeño receso para que puedan estirar su momentito, regresar y después continuamos con el evento del día de hoy. Así que les pido que por favor levanten ese ánimo y se regalen un fuerte aplauso para iniciar este coloquio internacional.
Muy buenas tardes a todas, a todos, a todas. Yo soy Laura Yanca.
Yo soy Enrique Flores. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas.
Vamos a iniciar la primera mesa. Son 3 mesas, 3 secuencias de conversaciones que hoy iniciamos con la primera. Mañana tenemos 2. Y esta, obviamente hay muchos puntos de encuentro que vamos a encontrar, que vamos a ver, a mapear, a identificar en estas 3 conversaciones, pero en esta primera, que tiene que ver con la cartografía crítica, el mapeo crítico, tenemos a 4 personas que después nos vamos a ir presentando tal vez un poco de manera más detallada, ¿no? Tenemos a 2 Raúles, eso facilita, a Raoul Bunschoten, a Jimena Ocampo, a Elena Tudela y a un también amigo Raúl Cárdenas. Y esta mesa un poco no tiene, un poco plantea la capacidad del mapeo, ¿no? como un ejercicio, no necesariamente como una finalidad de revelar nuevos mundos, ¿no? De revelar, de plantear nuevas posibilidades y alternativas, ¿no? Entonces, puedo leer, tal vez algo que nos ha inspirado también en este coloquio, es: nunca vamos a cambiar las cosas luchando o enfrentándonos contra la realidad existente. Para cambiar algo necesitamos construir un nuevo modelo que haga obsoleto el modelo existente. Es una frase de Buckminster Fuller que nuevamente nos ha inspirado no solamente para el logo, sino también para pensar que cómo podemos idealizar y cómo podemos mecanizar diferentes maneras de diseñar, ¿no? De diseñar, de pensar y de analizar el mundo que nos rodea. Y nuevamente esta frase sintetiza así el trabajo, ¿no? Y yo creo que también la visión con la que Buckminster Fuller diseñó el mapa de Time Action, que no sé si todos lo conocen, si no es importante tal vez conocerlo, es el Time Action Map, y que en su momento, realmente en su momento, fue el único mapa plano que revelaba la Tierra en toda la superficie con la menor deformación posible. Y al mismo tiempo revelaba nuestro planeta como una sola isla y un solo océano. No, y esto no es casual, ¿no? Él pensaba como muchos, ¿no? Y como desde ahí, desde antes, ¿no? Como una línea de pensadores que pensaban que el mapa, ¿no? Y que el mapeo podía realmente intentar revelar una cierta totalidad, ¿no? Una totalidad realmente abstracta e interpretativa. Y que el mapa, como lo comentó desde Midori, ¿no? De Ricardo, inclusive los participantes y los ponentes nos lo van a ir compartiendo, es una herramienta que nos permite dimensionarlo en planeta, que nos permite aprenderlo nuevamente en esta, entre comillas, totalidad, moldear nuestra visión de cómo vemos el mundo, de crear políticas y que nos permite también tomar decisiones. Y un poco tal vez como Buckminster Fuller lo planteaba, ¿no? Serviría como una guía, ¿no? Una guía de navegación en esto que él llamaba nuestra nave espacial, que es la Tierra. Y en este primer segmento abordamos el mapeo creativo, procesos y metodologías en su capacidad y compromiso de reconfigurar y transformar el espacio, el mundo en que vivimos. Y en este mundo, en este ambiente tal vez hoy contemporáneo, que está mediado por la tecnología, pero también determinado por los límites de su geografía terrestre, ¿qué mundo estamos proyectando? ¿Y qué tipos de procesos cartográficos estamos diseñando? En esta tarde, con estas 4 ponencias, vamos a viajar por las segundas pieles de Raúl, pasando por las geografías afectivas de Jimena, las cartografías generativas de Elena y hasta el urbanismo molecular de Raúl. Entonces, pues, la pregunta es ahora también para darle inicio a Raúl, ¿qué sigue? ¿No? What's next, Raúl? Entonces, con esto empezamos con la primera ponencia. Vamos a presentar a Raúl y hicimos una síntesis que obviamente no refleja toda la trayectoria de las y los ponentes. Entonces, Raoul Bunschoten es profesor de Planificación Urbana Sostenible y Diseño Urbano en la Universidad Técnica de Berlín y dirige el Laboratorio de Ciudad Consciente Shora en Berlín, pero también es parte de una red que ha construido y está reconstruyendo en Holanda y Londres. Él es arquitecto y diseñador urbano que ha liderado, así como Shora, otras iniciativas relacionadas con nuevas formas de producción, ¿no? Así como del bosque a la ciudad y de la ciudad al bosque. Esto no solamente en Europa, sino también en otros continentes. Y Shora, así como estos proyectos que nuevamente se articulan y se desarticulan, son parte de un clúster nuevamente activo, ¿no? en diferentes continentes, ¿no? Y ahora se encuentra preparando el lanzamiento del Bamboo Belt Union, un proyecto que vincula el desarrollo de prototipos de construcción de bambú de ingenierías en todo el mundo, ya nos compartirá. Raúl también ha desarrollado el concepto y varios conceptos, ha ido explorando y creo que también trabaja mucho con el juego de palabras para también reflejar su propio trabajo, ¿no? El concepto de urban curation, de curación urbana, y los métodos de gamificación, es una palabra que no estoy en español, relacionadas para abordar la compleja dinámica de la planificación y el diseño urbano en el contexto del cambio climático y la revolución digital. Raúl, si puedes pasar aquí al frente y compartirnos tu ponencia. Vamos a dar un fuerte aplauso a Raúl.
Thank you. time myself as well. I'm told that I'm going to be showing the numbers. Yeah, can you make that large, please? Okay, first, it's a great pleasure to be here. Last time I was here, there was a recess and the campus was completely empty. We didn't see a single student. And now it's full. It's wonderful. I think you're quite gifted. You're quite blessed, I would say. Blessed with this amazing campus. So it's really quite beautiful. So on the theme of cartography, I decided to basically tell a story because although there will be some scientific elements to the things I showed, a bit like the writer Borges. You know, this is the famous writer Borges who made this Chinese encyclopedia. It's a very short story where he lists a series of components, and they don't really make sense. The power of this story is that it looks like it is a complete encyclopedia, but actually it's a narrative. It doesn't make sense. And for this lecture, I did the same. I said, well, how can I show series of projects that are maps, we have maps. And I thought, no, let me tell you some stories that somehow maybe make sense, maybe they don't make sense. Because maps are also stories. So maps can be data, but they can also be stories, they're narratives. And that is, I think, quite important, especially when you go into the graphics of the map. And that becomes a very personal story. So it's about a personal story I want to tell you. And I did actually use the title Second Skin Was Next. This is the title of a big publication project that I'm starting now. But actually took the first line of this little narrative that I want to talk about today. So where are we? Apart from here in this wonderful another auditorium, so let's see if this can work. So let's where do I put? Here it works. So this is a series of sketches. I show you a few sketches today also. These are some sketches that I introduced once at the lecture at the TU Delft, in fact, about the themes I'm involved in at the moment quite a lot. So one is climate change, and the other one is a conscious city. What the conscious city is, you need even more storytelling because it's even less clear. It has to do with the way the data can create new kinds of spaces for us. And you could say that we are dealing with different components of the second skin of the earth. This is the theme I've been working on for many years. So the only way I work, really, I only can sketch. Cannot really draw in any other way. It's like a steam, so I use more of my sketches. And let's see what now. Where do I point? There. No, there. Yes, that's what I was. Okay, very good. Hey, works. Thank you. Now, this I put in the last minute because here's an image of my home. Right? Yesterday when I arrived, I thought I was going to see one thing, and of course I went to one of my favorite places, which is the Casa and the Studio, Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, which is such a wonderful place. And that's an amazing richness with the architecture inside. And then I thought, well, this is a picture of our home in London. And you see some work of my wife, photographer Herramienta, some fragments of my books, old things. And you see here one of the spheres. And you will see this sphere, which is an infographics sphere, reappear actually over the next part of the lecture. And so I thought, well, that's domestic environment where this comes. And actually behind that white sphere, there's another sphere. This is a little black sphere. And here I hold it in my hand. So here's the sphere of infographics. In fact, we have Mexico here in the center. I will talk about it anymore. I'm jumping ahead now, but this sphere represents the influence of economic processes on the Arctic. And you see here, of course, the difference between South America and North America, especially the United States, in terms of environmental impact on the Arctic. Right? So this single sphere already has a radical message about who's responsible for the changes in the Arctic Ocean. In the left is this little sphere that I made as part of the project of a series of spheres that tell a story about the birth of architecture. And when I put it in, I felt, yeah, this is a little Earth, and more we're going to have to take care of this little Earth, because otherwise we lose it, or it loses us. I'm not quite sure yet. But so these are the stories I want to tell. Where are we? Who are we? What do we do? Where do we go? What could we be? How do we get there? Who do we share with? What do we know? And how do we survive? And what do we know? So again, it's more a Borges-like story, but it's filled with some nuggets that are cartographic. And I want to start with this one. So now we're in the if you want to try to go back. Okay, so where are we? I'm starting. Now, I'm just making sorry, it's moving very slowly. So there you go. So these are maps that I love very much. They're maps made by the Inuit in the north, in the Arctic region. And these maps, they're made of wood or sometimes bone. And the fishermen, they carry them, hold them in their hands when they go out fishing in the boats. And these maps I've always looked at for many, many years because it's a haptic map. And the little indentations, these points, they refer to the islands and the inlets and things so that they know how to get home or where fish or something like that. So I just wanted to put it into the stance that the mapping, here you see, this is actually a more beautiful object, but here you see a bit how it refers to a real map that we have. But this haptic thing is so important, for me, very important, because for several years I've been making haptic maps, and where the touch of the hand creates the information. So not real data information. So this was a set of spheres that I created on the Biennale in the Netherlands, 27 spheres. And they were every time about this first cut that the architects had to make in the earth. You see it actually here outside. So beautiful in the place where there's this restaurant, this club, university, there's a cut in the earth and the lava appears. And there's a beautiful garden below. So these are kind of lava-like primal earth type spaces, but every time there's a kind of cut, it says now and here. So and here you see, here you see again, these knives were made to just hover above. It's the moment before the architect has to make his or her cut in the earth, because architecture is a violent profession. But it also says here we are right now. And we will make a space. And so a few more variations of these cuts. And the cut at some point becomes a cross. So we have the first kind of cartographic sign. And so with that sign, these raw spaces, and they're all based on the same kind of volcanic rock that you see out here. I had just visited Iceland. And so I set up an experiment. Actually, they're constructed spheres, and it's for instance, so they're real physical experiments. You see actually working around there. And at this point, My wife and me, we looked together at these things and said, well, at first, at one point, this is a map of lava, but created by our hands, so that they're haptic maps. But then I asked my wife to photograph a series of black squares, of course, based on Malevich's black square. And I was saying, okay, what if this becomes a map? Could it be a map? And what if it's a map? What does it represent as a map? And so since many years, I've been kind of playing with this what if question, and created as a first project out of this physical lava-like stuff, and started to come, for example, gardens. This is a detailed film project for a competition I did in Berlin long ago. I'm presenting the whole project. I just presented a garden, which is made out of quasi-data, there's letters, hand-drawn. It started to interpret this thing also handmade as a map. So maps born out of the what if, the question without any form of data, no real information here. And so, but there's a kind of background information. For example, the garden in the center of Berlin, I wanted to make with everything that is there in terms of the original garden, the original land of Berlin. So you see lists of fluids and malleable opacities, particular matters and strings, and those we then used to make the information for us. And then, so that actually is then the background becomes the real data to form these different versions. But the maps are compositions. They are not mapping something, they are map-like compositions. And so, of course, that later became trendy, kind of the art of kind of wild gardening. So, and then we asked the question, how do you make this three-dimensional? How do you cut? How do you cut in this, how do you cut into this layer, this skin? And so she was students who did lots of exercises to this kind of layers that we kind of thought were inside this skin that led to this concept of the second skin. So who is that kind of question comes up? Who are we able to do this? And so after having gone through this kind of haptic creation of map-like structures, I wanted to think about how maps express who we are. And now I'm showing you some glimpses of lectures I've been giving to students like you for over the years, bachelor student lectures and master's lectures. One of the things I lecture about is about, for example, Greek cities in the Mediterranean Sea. And here I give you a very short kind of little introduction to something that is really fascinating for me. That is really an urban planning kind of question, right? This is the city of Priene, and here the map is a geometrical construct, and it's set on a mountain, so it's actually kind of draped a little bit. And what happens is that the grid is punctuated by a series of communal institutions. So here we have the Agora, which is where the birth of democracy is. We have the Temple of Athena, and we have the Proletariat, which was the seat of government, and we have the theater, which is the reflection of life. And those things, if you look at them, they create a space. Here we go. They create a space that is different from the geometry. So initially there's the geometry, and that's you could say the cartographic foundation of a city. In placing a city inside, it's kind of topology. But these relationships between these communal institutions creates something I would now call a meta space, something new. And I will just run you through that. So here, again, I'm sketching our justice institutions. So they're all the main institutions that we have in our society. Democratic countries have these institutions. And with those institutions, we first of all create special environments inside the grid. And second of all, then there are relationships that emerge between, let's say, a temple and the space like the Agora. And then you see that with these little arrows, what I'm trying to do here is show the relationship of the other space. Sorry, this thing is right on its own. And when I would ask the question, who are we? I would say, well, we are the orange lines. This is really us. Yes, the grid and so on and so forth, the theater, but it's orange lines. It's really us, because that's the relationship between the Temple of Athena and the trading in the Stoa. This is about us as a society. And so I'll give you one other example of this. We did some work at some point in a little town in the north of Ireland, and next to Northern Ireland. And there we did another exercise in, first of all, we started as a project that was the planning of a public hall. So we planned this public hall next to the church, on church land. And that it seemed an architectural project, but actually the reality is that it looks like this and it looks like that. This is an area that's saturated with conflict, and it's not deep, it's conflict. And so we started to look at the actual identity of this environment, where it's conflicts, by looking at these, the layers of the society through a map. This is, I will read briefly here the way we're structured. Now we're really into mapping territory, right? So we use 4 categories, which you'll see emerge a little bit later about these maps. The first one is browning. What was the main brown of this environment? And it was rife this conflict, but also different kind of local, very international kind of flows. So the brand is defined by programs linked to naming, marketing, identity creation, cultural production, memory, storytelling, programs linked to what makes the project look and taste good. The second one is Earth, programs relating to physical aspects of the prototype, land, water, volume, spatial organization, and territory. The third one, Flow, programs regulating flows through the site, traffic, people, goods, air, water, energy, and information, and waste, and money. And the fourth one, Incorporation, programs altering and creating the legal, institutional, political, social, and managerial framework for a project. As you can see here, we really got into the graphics. We didn't care that much about so many data, but we really wanted to tell the story in these 4 layers. And at this point, we're into the kind of this kind of graphic reality, and that's the beauty of maps, like here, the map of the land. And we didn't even add information because we felt, wow, this is already almost self-explanatory. It looks like that. And the last one is the map of the communities, right, which are like spirals. They're contained, but they may be spread out over the land and maybe fight with each other, compete with each other. So we're looking for a symbolic language to make these maps with this apparatus. We started to go into much more complex stuff. And I'll show you a bit of a glimpse of where this can go. For example, here in the kind of space of the smart city development, we're really searching for definitions. We don't know yet exactly what is the space, how do you plan. So we started using these same kind of tools that I just showed in the average maps of branding, earth, flow, and incorporation. Incorporation here is the people of the different communities. Let's say a community of cyclists or a community of financial experts. But the striking thing is what appears at the top in terms of the branding is indeed data cloud. Now, what we started to do is try to draw the data cloud, because the data you don't see, right? There's trillions of data flying around in this room, but you don't see them. So we try to actually draw them to make us aware of them. That's the beginning of the conscious city thinking, the awareness, creation of something that is complex, which is a city regulated or managed by people based on logistics, but actually run by data. So And we started looking at it as a visual kind of environment. And this is, of course, a snapshot of kind of a dynamic space with trillions of data. So, but then what we did, and it's now a glimpse of the kind of the present here, we've been exercising with what this data space really can look like. Now, this is my exit lecture just a few weeks ago. These are actual students that have created a metaverse in this lobby space. And what you see is they're picking up with their iPads a separate universe that exists in the same space, that wraps the people up, that exists simultaneously. And we talk about virtual data, but this is as physical in a way. And we can see the people, they were totally amazed because it's not physically there, and yet it's enveloping us in this space. So this is the consequence of working with this kind of data as a kind of top layer of the city. Now you may think this is just fun, right? Or it's a kind of big commercial enterprise. No, I think there are tools that are going to be used. That means some of the mapping tools are in fact dynamic constructs created through metaverse in order to deal with very complex questions, such as the one related to climate change. So what do we do? Well, we've been doing lots of beam throwing over the years. Beam throwing means random site and making little stories about these random sites. We do that to understand the environment. So we create little stories, we call mini scenarios, and here comes something that's quite important in a little sketch. At the moment you can look at conditions in any kind of random site, we call them sites, you create first of all taxonomy, and second of all you have the tools with which to plan and make something else. You begin to connect these different things. And this is another way of mapping. So here you see, for example, the work we did in Kyoto. This was with students, and we had an endless amount of information we gathered from random sites to play with, right? And one of them, for example, was a story we discovered was about teenage girls that took time out of school and put their clothes, changed in the station, put their clothes in a kind of locker box, and started to go out as men. They were called the locker girls. We discovered that. And this whole thing was a huge scandal that people didn't want to talk about. And yet it's there, it's super real. But then we started to, of course, also look at other beam sites, the one more beautiful kind of water areas, different zones. And we started to develop a very different graphic to say, okay, how do you mark, for example, a water reservoir which is about to change because of the industry that's close by? How do we change this? And we try to develop a very crude, simple language to talk about boundaries, places, names. And so that's where the graphic comes from. Then it became a little bit more complex because they tried to develop a way that the map could become dynamic, so that the map could begin to tell us stories of how to plan, how to make things. And we discovered that we could, for example, draw a map three-dimensionally, and then begin to draw, let's say, flows in the map, and then make things that are like stones, that are stepping stones. And now we're beginning to talk about design, because you can't really predict the flows and changes of society, but sometimes you know the stepping stones. You can't design the stepping stones. So that's the task we often have as architects and planners, is making the stepping stones. So we've been doing this until recently. This was just this year. As master students, we've been doing beam throwing over the whole territory of Berlin. We then mapped them instantly and we turn them into a vast database of small stories. But actually what we do is that now we begin to plan.
So there's a prototype for wooden house.
Now, what we do then, we create games. There should be sound here, but it doesn't matter. So we develop games with these beam sites, so which we can work with master students or children, small as 4 or 5 years old. And what these students do here, they use a tool called the Urban Gallery to make all these stories together and plan quite complex things, like, for example, how we build cities that are carbon neutral.
Maybe there's not even going to be storage in between the wood that's...
And you see, they're all working with maps. And in this case, they're actually drawing the maps as it goes. So what happens next is that we need to find out how to combine kind of game sets with rules. And we became a bit more strict with the graphics we wanted to use. So here you see, this is another competition in Copenhagen. We looked at the way that you create a game set. That we use the same symbols to introduce communities, people, and create a kind of DNA structure where we say, here's a point, we have a particular kind of activity, then we have housing, we describe the housing like this. And these are briefs then, and then we begin to make a plan, to compose a plan. And the plan is, in fact, the real plan is housing. And you can see here how it's embedded. And then we got the second prize in this competition, which I didn't believe because we really created the game, gamification. The map is the game. The mayor, in fact, wanted this project realized. But it wasn't realized at the end. So at this point, I also dream of these slides. I see them as kind of paintings. And I feel that sometimes urban planning is so neglected in terms of how beautiful it can be and how playful it can be, right? And how dynamic it can be, like fish in the water, right? So where do we go? Well, we have some serious things to do with mapping. And for example, we have to establish if we survive, that comes later, right? And how do we do that? And for example, we have to look at the way we used to work. Right? I fly here, and if we eat, we use products all over the world. This is a map, a three-dimensional map of a set of meals that one of my students did, and he analyzed where the food came from for the meals. And basically, he discovered that food comes everywhere. This is, if you have a supermarket in London, right? This is not a poor British somewhere, but it's the reality of our food and dinner. And we now have maps like this. This is the production, the lines of production of a laptop. And this is, you see, the same dimension map. But this is one of the maps of one meal. So the products of one meal, if they include things like pepper, things like really things that's like spices. And that begins to create this world. This is now not anymore just a story. This was with Ellen's friends. It's highly scientific. It's precisely located and so on. So with this, we begin to discover that our image of the world is also quite different. It's not that easy anymore. And we've done, over the years, we've done a lot of work on supply chains. Asked ourselves, where do cities grow? And how we map the process of growing. And this is a map of some of the supply chains, mostly driven by the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. And most of the big new cities emerge out of the nodal points of these lines. This is where cities grow. And so you see one of the examples we have looked at, and this example is the Arctic Ocean. And one of the supply chain there is an info cable. The blue line there is an information cable. And because information, data, right, internet needs energy, it creates locations where energy is pumped into the line. And this is where cities are beginning to grow. And then this is work by students. Then what they did is look at the data information. And because this, what I mentioned before, the Arctic is suffering heavily from the environmental impacts, it will become a growing metropolitan region. So we started to develop a kind of cartography of these dynamic impacts on the Arctic region. And as you may know, that the Arctic region is heating up 6 times faster than any other place on Earth. So it will change very radically very soon. And so we have maps that look at the locations of these new towns. We begin to look at the architectural constructs that are part of it. and we look at the whole region and the interconnectivity between that. The second example of mapping urbanization. There's one more image here. This is also one of these things that is going to happen. You're going to have cities in the Arctic, and they may look like this. These are gigantic machines that suck the carbon out of the air, and people live in them as well. So it's a science fiction, really, vision designed by students. And you may not like it, but it's, you know, the Arctic may become one of the big lungs or geoengineering places in the Earth, based on the maps. This is a completely different example. Now we are in Indonesia. And I just wanted to show you this because in Indonesia, I'll talk about that a bit more in a few minutes. Indonesia, we have an enormous loss of the rainforest. And here you see the attempt to create a kind of game-like method to say, okay, cities in Indonesia will grow, we cannot stop it, but can we, through a game-like situation, use, for example, palm oil, the trees of palm oil production to create a sustainable environment, an ecological city, and actually control the city growth. That's what this map is doing. It's not a fixed plan, it's a planification to link building of cities to the waste of a product that is deeply problematic, palm oil, right? That's used for cookies and things like that. Now, the most interesting thing here is this diagram for me. I know it's abstract, but it's a diagram where you see what happens, for example, when you take agricultural cycle, namely the production of palm oil, and you mutate it into a workflow that then leads towards the use of waste for ecological building products. So if you want to change things, you actually have to think in imitation of these kind of workflow diagrams. This is a kind of core activity that we as architects have to learn. What could we be? Well, we can be choreographers, we can be dancers, we can be curators, if we want to do dynamic master planning. All these things are as important as other exact data. So let me show you another project where we kind of introduced this. It was already mentioned, this term urban curation. How do we curate all the phenomena that happen in a city? And here we looked, there was another competition actually we did, where we created a line. We got the third prize in this project. We created a line like the edge that I was talking about before, and we used the line like a choreographic kind of tool to link a lot of activities to each other. They're like drawn like this here. Here we go. So of course the line, separates the sea from the water, and of course about the line at the end becomes the exchange line. And this I'm merely showing a little bit for the playful graphics to how planning, the map sometimes can be a line. But then the line you begin to play like a string of a violin. It's very simple, but you can play Mozart. So we created this line, and then we created this kind of choreography of things that begin to happen on and around the line. So the map becomes an instrument, like a violin. And I just brought this to see the simple you play the violin, like a musical score, go back and forth, back and forth. And here, I'm just showing you a few images of this. These are the competition panels. It was fantastic. It created a lot of uproar. It was handmade. It's not digital. It was all collaged. And yet, it was deeply serious into the plan for the city. Right? You see all the kind of programs that we put in. You can show the Nokia. But you can see the rest were very serious. They even included my sketches here. And there were huge debates. They were very close, I think, to choosing the third project. Pity, it would have been world famous by now, I think. How do we get, yeah, because now they have an opera, a few other big buildings sitting there. So how do we get there? Now I'm going a bit deeper in the kind of work we're doing. And it's getting quite serious, yeah? And I'm running out of time, the numbers are coming up. So I'll go quick. We started to say, how can we do really serious, difficult projects with this? So we started to work on a project in Taiwan Strait. And we are now publishing a book that is a manual of operations for the relationship between mainland China and Taiwan. If you follow the news, you know that this may become one of the big conflict zones next, right after the big war in Europe. So we created this series of maps that were like this here, and then we created a manual of operations based on the same kind of game, where you can choose, there's some cards, there's activities, and you go into a map. And then we write stories. These are all propositions. And so the book is using a method that uses the maps. And that's the map I showed before, which is this. Let me just go back for a moment. Sorry, it's quite slow in reacting. Yes, I can see that. Okay, machine is on the right. So maybe it's faster. There is somebody controlling it also. Are you controlling it over there? Otherwise, I can say forward at least. So here you see we use maps and a game-like tool to create negotiations about projects that could be done across this strait. And we use the gamification method. Here you see how we connect things together in order to make very serious projects. And I'll show a little bit in the last 10 minutes I still have about that. And here we create maps that come out of this negotiation method that we use to work. We are publishing this book in about 2 months' time, 3 months maybe. Now, and I'm actually very curious politically what it's going to mean. I have a feeling it's maybe I'll never be able to go to China again, or maybe the opposite. So I'm a bit worried about that. But it's actually a manual of negotiation across the Taiwan Strait. And well, so who do we share with? Let me just try to finish this. Now, this is very personal. I grew up in this forest, and only now, when I'm getting older, right, I'm beginning to realize we really got to make a pact with nature. We cannot just go on exploiting. We got to think, and I think you will hear other speakers about that saying much more about this. So I started to look at these kinds of European forests again. And right now we're building a quite big project for a new institution in Germany. And yeah, here we go. You see some of my master students looking at the whole of European forestry and trying to build up something that's called forest to city, city to forest value chain. And the question is, can we build cities that are grown out of nature? That's the big question we're now working on at this new institute. And the answer is yes, but it's difficult. It's not easy. And you cannot exploit it to make a pact with nature, cooperate with nature. And so we're working now on that. We're trying to create an institute that is doing this. And that institute is called Bauhütte 4.0. It's a German word. It refers to the kind of medieval Bauhütte, building much of the cathedrals. And the idea is that we build cities now like cathedrals, but out of wood. Let me jump for a moment on the next thing. Let me jump on bamboo. This was already mentioned before. Just the next fascination. I'm building up something that's called the Global Bamboo Belt Unit. This is built on maps. First of all, it's built on a map of the world. Second of all, this is now built on GIS data. And we use GIS data to look for the availability of wood here. And or around here you see on the right hand side the numbers how much. Why? Because we're starting to work with different governments in Indonesia and elsewhere to build new cities or at least parts of cities with bamboo. And maybe here you see some of, now we're getting into more scientific part. So you see some of the clustering where we kind of see bamboo, we will calculate the biomass, and we begin to understand where is it available. This we do partly, and this is a new step that we don't only look at cities, we look actually at the maps of the rainforest. So this passion for whom we share this is because this is happening. I'll just show you a few images. And so the images, they show the loss of the rainforest. And when I started to see this appear in our tool, I had to cry. I said, I don't believe this. The orange is the burning of the forest. And you can see the patterns. And it's the patterns that scare me more than anything else. So here So here you see some of the patterns we are now detecting. And if you follow those patterns, in 5 years' time, there will not be any more continuous rainforest in Borneo, the largest, second largest rainforest in the world after Amazonia. And so we started to look at the edges, what happens at these edges. This is now a project we are working on. This is now we're moving into kind of critical mapping here, because knowing this, what we're doing, we can act. We can begin to do things that I'll try to show the machine. What do we know? Why can we act? Because we know something. And we know something because as we have now very precise data, we're now actually linked to hundreds of data sets given us through the satellites and so forth. And for example, here in Thailand, we're looking at the exact amount of forests, and we're looking at the way that they grow or that they're destroyed. And so we have knowledge through the map. And some of my students are beginning now to create a project in which they look at the available amount of bamboo in Thailand to start building as their own new buildings with this bamboo. You see some of now we're bringing to data sites. So these are maps based in hardcore data, and this person is working on the first projects in Thailand to build part of cities with engineers engineered. So knowing this, we're able to go into something that's, let's see more of the numbers. Where would we get at this? We're beginning to map out the value chain, and this is the value chain of building with compressed bamboo. And we're now looking at all these colored sections in order to get to this point, of course, for example, to create mass-scale social housing with compressed bamboo. And then, of course, you have to start working together with all the actors in an environment like this, in a map that you know. And this is now a really new form of planning, and that goes across a series of disciplines. And it goes partly, you know, from very intuitive planning to data science-based planning. Now, before I came here, I asked what about Mexico? How much bamboo is there in Mexico? And to our surprise, quite a lot actually. Did you know that? I didn't know that. So we're looking here at the availability of bamboo in you can see Mexico here is on the left, right? It's actually the largest in the area. These are data, these are scientific data. So we're beginning to look at the possibility of targeting for a year, there you see it. So these are databases. That's quite a large number actually. The bamboo areas in Mexico. So you could start a bamboo construction project here. In fact, why not? Why don't you join this project here? This is a world game, like what was said earlier. We can start quite soon. We're inviting people, our students from these different countries. Mexico is not yet on the list. Everything is so easy today, Zoom and so on and so forth. We're going to do this kind of game, which you saw before, based on this kind of world map, in order to see where we can start prototypes. So the question is, how do we survive? I think I'm running out of time, but I'll try to very quickly run through the last few things. Well, we have to develop methods of building these biogenic materials in order to reach us to, otherwise we just don't survive. So we have to create, for example, projects like this is a district that is a completely wood-based district in Berlin. We're part of the planning of this. Now, you need to industrialize to do this. You cannot do this kind of traditional methods. So we have to look at industry. How do you make very large-scale numbers of housing, for example, out of biogenic materials, not only wood or bamboo, but also other materials. However it's designed, it doesn't matter how it looks like, as long as it contains the carbon that we want to get out of in the air. So we have to look now at where it comes from, how it's made. You see 100% carbon detailing, wood detailing to contain the carbon. So we're beginning to think in construction as a storage system for carbon globally. And I'm going to skip a bit. And you need tools to do that. So, for example, here we have developed another tool to look at the exact numbers of carbon that we can store in this interactive map. It's a dashboard actually, and so you really need hardcore tools. This is another formal map. It's a dashboard because this is going to become hot territory. Here, the carbon balancing of construction is becoming a major thing in the next few years, especially now with the energy crisis we're having. So we need these kinds of tools to build like this, to understand. Of course, that doesn't stop anything from being actually creative, artistic about it. So they can still build maybe with the freedom they would like to have. And so we need to find out completely new ways. The buildings are nature. Effectively, it's a big emerging debate, right? The city is nature, as long as it contains things like that, made with nature, made from nature. And they can look like this or other, right? There are many ways that it can look like. But this is based on the maps that lead to this kind of thinking and making. And maybe the last, I'm almost there, the end. Maps can also contain symbolic things. This is a project we've been working on with Berlin for many years to create an energy district out of a former airport. And although you need curatorial methods, you need scientific methods, you need to draw in such a way that people can recognize it. Hey, we want a pink with purple bracelet for our city, a ring of colors. That is this new energy district. So maps can also become very powerful symbolic forms that become effective. You could also say, they're logos, right? And they lost all detail here. So back into the pure symbolic form, but very powerful because we need energy plus districts now in our cities. So when do we know? I'll keep this very short. Again, we need to create science. We need to create a science in which we draw maps of the world, in which we have these boxes, in which we begin to see precisely when are the tipping points here. So here we have the information on production. And he gives Mexico once more in perspective with the United States and Latin America. And these are kind of energy levels. And so again, these are data things, but they're very powerful, these maps. And they allow us to play it. So I'm going to skip this bit now. This is a bit of theory I have here. Let me just finish with the last images. This is very interesting stuff because this is where the consciousness begins to be interesting. What point does intelligence bypass technology? And this begins to be. Let's keep this for a moment. Let's go to the last images. Yeah. Right, and energy plus city. And what I like about this is this, of course, this is the hardcore mapping. This is how you begin to see whether a city can change and actually stays as an energy production that you need to. But at the same time, if you have maps like this, perhaps let's do another 2 minutes for a question, maybe.
Hay 5-10 minutos.
Yes, here.
¿Cuál es la metodología que utiliza? What is the methodology
Yeah.
you use for this?
Okay, sorry.
¿Cuál es la metodología que utiliza?
Oh, this is nice. Okay, yeah. Otherwise, just shout it out. Shout out. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes.
La pregunta es ¿qué metodología, y diría tal vez qué metodologías ha utilizado? Tal vez qué ha sido estructural esas metodologías, tal vez qué es lo que en todos tus proyectos han sido puntos de convergencia o de divergencia en las diferentes metodologías.
Yes, we've used several methodologies. Yeah, some of the methodologies are a type of cartography. So we develop these kind of graphics for simple maps with which we can represent complexity, but with simple means. Then we have developed methods to play games, planning games on the basis of those maps. And then we are developing right now methods of linking those games to planning methods that are based on scientific data. Those are the 3 phases of work I've been showing. And the scientific data are there, first of all, to make politicians believe in it and make the breakthrough if necessary, but also to be able to, to work with the economy and investors to find the money to be able to make actual change. And there, the methodologies we borrow effectively, right? We develop prototypes by coding, and so on and so forth, but the actual back of the platforms are vast engines that are now available.
¿Hay otra pregunta? La voy a leer en español para que todos lo entendamos. Usted mezcla experimentación artística con métodos científicos. ¿Cómo es la convivencia entre las personas y la legitimidad de estos encuentros entre el arte y la ciencia?
Good question. That's a very good question. I believe in the principle of hope. I believe the science is very serious. I think what we know about climate change is very serious. But I hope in future generations, and I believe in culture. That means that we can imagine. And imagination is linked to literature, art, and music maybe. It's the creation of something new. And I think the idea of the second skin is the creation of something new, but it's not necessarily bad. It can also be good that we create a kind of giant habitat as a second skin that allows maybe biodiversity to happen, that allows maybe more species to survive. So I think the most important part is imagination. Never link it to science and scientific innovation. And the architects, they should be in the middle of all of this, because architects, they are like cultural curators. They're ambassadors for society, but they're also the ones that can connect everything, because they can sometimes intuitively create something. It's called design. That's what design is.
Yo quería cerrar con una pregunta. Tú abriste mencionando a Borges, ¿sí? Y me gustaría ahora tal vez cerrar o abrir, ¿no?, una pregunta con el cuento de Borges, que habla sobre el rigor de la ciencia, ¿no? Un pequeño cuento muy chiquito, de 2 párrafos, donde el primer cuento habla sobre el arte de la cartografía, ¿no?, buscando esta perfección, donde intentaba representar una provincia en una región, ¿no?, y después el imperio en una provincia, donde el mapa, perdón, iba escalándose hasta que el imperio se convierta en la escala del imperio, ¿no? Entonces eso por un lado, obviamente tu trabajo nos lleva a pensar en la escalabilidad, de repente la importancia de que nos permite tal vez ahora esta ciencia de la cartografía, ¿no?, de transgredir escalas hasta llevarnos a la escala tal vez hasta de la experimentación, ¿no?, del experimento como seres humanos, ¿no? En el segundo párrafo del cuento, ¿no?, habla sobre tal vez el olvido de este arte de la ciencia y cómo las siguientes generaciones un poco soltaron, ¿no?, este imperio, ¿no? Y ahí termina. Entonces, un poco mi pregunta es un poco como el what's next, ¿no? ¿Qué es lo que sigue? Tal vez como esto que tú llamas de la ciudad consciente, ¿no?, tal vez puede cambiar este fin de este cuento.
Yes, first of all, the end of the story is actually that he says, if you go to the deserts in China, you still find some fragments of the original map. This is important. Fragments. So, secondly, yes, the conscious city is about awareness, to create a consciousness that brings people and machines and animals and nature together. And I think the next generation of maps is to negotiate this and to somehow create an image of this consciousness. And I've talked about survival, but there's also habitation, because you probably know yourself, there's populations in the world that are growing explosively, like in Africa, and we haven't even seen the beginning of the types of cities that are going to emerge there. So we have to be ready for that. And I think good maps will allow like a common ground within which we can negotiate. There are conventions, but there are also places where we can fight and negotiate about something. We want more of this. And my thing is, I want to make sure that the Taiwan Strait book is out pretty soon, because this war is very scary. That's come, and negotiation is possible. And the second thing is, I've made it my mission to still make this bubble project happen, and see if we can, on Africa and South America and South Latin America, actually also into Southeast Asia, to create a kind of civic spaces where we bring different groups of population together, indigenous tribes, people living in slums, and to begin to create these so-called value chains that are nature-based solutions for construction. That's my mission. Lastly, the last thing, when I put in these last maps of Chengdu, these interactive maps, I thought, wow, I have a complete set of cadastre maps of Mexico City in my files. One of my Mexican students brought them together. What if you do the same thing on Mexico City? It was one of my last thoughts. I put this lecture together. Thank you.
Okay. Hay otras preguntas, pero creo que no nos vamos a tener tiempo para una. ¿Cómo te enfrentas a mapear data que aún no existe? Sobre todo data que está siendo escondida hacia la sociedad. O sea, una parte como de ciencia ficción o algo que tiene que ver con eso.
Okay, the first part of the question is look, we humans have done this all the time. Just think of, think of religions. Just go to some, let's say, Baroque churches, because you have here or somewhere else, where you see a mapping of an imagined world, but through data. Right? The whole art, work of art that we get from the religion is a mapping of imaginary structures, the belief structures, but it's still it's led to fantastic art. So this is nothing new for us. We do this all the time. We make up data, and sometimes we also have scientific measurements. The second question is more difficult. Yes, we have to be very careful, because more and more the data cloud is not a cloud that's visible to us. Most of it is in fact invisible. And look at the whole debate now about Twitter, what's happening, this is the next steps that Elon Musk has taken. This is becoming more dictatorial, this is more transparent. Right, so we have to become very good at understanding, creating transparency of these data. If we start working with them, this is totally new territory, because you can manipulate those as like anything. When somebody says science, it doesn't mean it's true. You still need conventions to frame the truth. So we have to be careful when we use this kind of data science. We have to be very clear what points do we believe in it, why.
Solo para cerrar una última pregunta que tiene que ver con dónde estamos, ¿no? ¿Cuál es tal vez la responsabilidad y la oportunidad que tenemos en espacios académicos, ¿no? Para dar estos siguientes pasos, ¿no? Estos siguientes pasos que tienen que ver con una urgencia, por un lado, pero también con cambios culturales, ¿no? Entonces estamos en un momento donde tenemos mucha prisa para cambiar o redireccionar. Pero por otro lado tenemos que construir cambios que se pueden basar y pueden ayudar a negociaciones, ¿no? Pero que requieren cambios culturales importantes, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cuál es el papel de la academia? ¿Cómo se puede interpretar también o reinventar también el espacio académico?
Well, two things. Think of the Bhutan submarine, right? When those lines, orange lines in this map that I showed you, have led to the center of the Uran volcanics fields here quite soon, because they lost their territory. So is this a value for us? Possibly. I'm living in a small hotel, a boutique hotel right now, so far away. It's an old hacienda that was kept by a company that turned it into a hotel. So the question is, what are the values we want to hold on to and give to the next generations? And then we have to protect those values, make sure we are there, and make sure they can do something else, these next generations. But we should also create the tools and not only debts, because right now we're creating debts for the next generations, right? but we also have to create tools with which the next generation can begin to shape its own future. So there's a succession of alternative and new futures that can be, and architects have a large responsibility for this, because we're creating a lot of infrastructure for these futures.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias, Raúl. Con esto tenemos que cerrar y pasar a la siguiente mesa.
Estamos haciendo entrega simbólica de nuestro reconocimiento.
Raúl, antes de que te vayas, si quieres, bueno, aprovechando que Dino está de vuelta, le estamos haciendo una entrega simbólica, si quieres, a nombre de Dino en representación de la facultad y de todo el equipo. Muchísimas gracias por tu generosidad.
We'll come with some books as well. So one of the things I've been showing we're going to publish. We'll see coming out of books. Thank you very much.
Bueno, ahora nos toca la plática de Jimena Ocampo Aguirre. La vamos a presentar.